This episode is brought to you by FX's Alien Earth, the official podcast. Each week, host Adam Rogers is joined by guests, including the show's creator, cast, and crew, in this exclusive companion podcast. They will explore story elements, deep dive into character motivations, and offer an episode-by-episode behind-the-scenes breakdown of each terrifying chapter in this new series. Search FX's Alien Earth wherever you listen to podcasts.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. With school out, summer is the perfect time to teach our kids real-world money skills they'll use forever. Greenlight is a debit card and the #1 family finance and safety app used by millions of families, helping kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. Parents can send their kids money and track their spending and saving, while kids build money confidence and skills in fun ways. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/Spotify. That's greenlight.com/Spotify.
This podcast is part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club, a program designed to help all podcasts reach their full potential. For information about joining the Robots Radio Rocket Club, check out robotsradio.net.
Hello, and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. My name is Austin, also known as Teacup.
And my name is Shelby, also known as She-Cup.
Join us as we embark on unraveling all of your favorite mysteries from the Assassin's Creed universe. From assassins to Templars to the mysterious Isu and more. We will seek to uncover it all, so join us and maybe even take a leap of faith.
Hello and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. My name is Shelby, or She-Cup, and I am your co-host or guide for this podcast.
And I am Austin, or Teacup. I am your other co-host and your lore expert / game expert for this podcast.
Yeah, and so last week, if you listened, we did part 1 of a kind of mix of a character deep dive on Connor Kenway and the Assassins versus Templars about the American Revolution. So that was part 1 last week. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it before you listen to this one, because this is part 2 of that story. We're continuing talking about Connor, and we're continuing to learn about how the Assassins, about how the American Revolution ends in the Assassin's Creed universe.
Yes. So as we left Connor this last time, he had just assassinated John Pitcairn, and he had discovered a plot to assassinate George Washington, the commander-in-chief of the colonial army. So in 1776, Achilles contacted someone by the name of Benjamin Talmadge, an ally of the Brotherhood, who led Connor to New York in search of Thomas Hickey. Talmadge explained that Hickey was responsible for running a counterfeiting ring there and was plotting to murder Washington. So a little background, just real quick. The Templars want to murder Washington so that they will put Charles Lee as commander-in-chief of the colonial army. So it's not that they think that he's a necessarily bad commander or that he's bad for the revolution. They just want their own person in power.
Right.
So when Connor arrived at Hickey's operation, he drew his hidden blade, revealing himself to be an assassin. Hickey comments that Connor's kind had been wiped out. There's a conflict. They get out of the building. They're chased through the streets. And they get apprehended by guards with possession of counterfeiting. Connor tries to say that, like, hey, I wasn't involved in this, but they don't care. And they, guess what? Knock him out and take him to prison.
Yikes. Of course, though.
Yeah. And so in prison, Thomas Hickey is in a cell next to him. And he's like mocking the assassin that he's in there. And Connor's rebuttal is that Washington is safe now that Hickey's in prison. And then Hickey points as Charles Lee and Haytham Kenway release Hickey and move him to a larger cell due to an ongoing investigation. Just as the Templars were about to leave, Hickey asked them what was to be done with the assassin. Haytham instructed Charles to deal with the problem and later promised Charles Lee promises Connor that he has plans for him, which would kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Connor meets another prisoner named Mason Wells, who apparently had crafted a fake key. Connor uses that to escape. And then he makes his way to Hickey's cell. However, upon reaching it, he finds that the warden of the prison is dead. He finds Lee and Hickey at the doorway. They hold him at gunpoint, and that he's going to be brought to trial for plotting to assassinate Washington. And they were going to pin the murder of the warden on Connor. Connor attacks Lee, but is easily knocked out because he's weak. Again, Connor is knocked out.
Oh my gosh. How many times does this kid get punched in the face?
And that's when Charles Lee realizes who Connor is and that he recognizes him as the young boy who he had threatened years ago. And he kind of like smugly remarks that he's glad that Connor kept his promise to find him. And then again, knocks him back unconscious where he's dragged back to his cell. He wakes up as he's going to like a hangman's noose. And as he neared the front of the crowd, he looks around and he sees like all these assassin recruits that he's done. They're kind of moving along the rooftops, killing all these guards. And a spectator who thinks that he's trying to kill like the great commander-in-chief, George Washington, comes up and basically socks him in the face. And as he's knelt down, he's helped up by Achilles and tells him to give the signal the moment that he wants to be freed. So as it's going on, Lee is pontificating in his self-arrogance about Connor's supposed crimes, and they place a noose around his neck. He gives the signal. As the trapdoor falls, he's freed. He runs through the crowd, moving against guard, heading to protect Washington. As Thomas Hickey's trying to come and kill Washington, Connor kills Hickey, and with his last breath, Hickey says that he doesn't care for the Templar cause. He doesn't care for their order or their New World Order. He just wants to be paid and have power.
Right.
And after he's dead, Connor finds himself at gunpoint with the colonial army. However, he has an ally this time where Israel Putnam vouches for him and says he saved Washington, and he's released. So yeah, he does that. He saves George Washington's life again.
Right.
Yes. So now we get a little kind of detour. So a couple years pass. It's now 1777, and Connor is not anywhere near to getting rid of the Templars or the threat of like they pose to his George Washington's life. He tells George Washington several times, like, hey, Charles Lee is trying to kill you, but Washington refuses to dismiss Charles Lee or bring him up on what he calls baseless claims.
Interesting.
Yes. And so as winter rolls in 1777, Connor decided to go and warn Washington, basically, and tell him of the assassins' plots. And he basically like to tell him about this hidden conflict, which Achilles tries to stop him and says that assassins work quietly and do not go announcing conspiracies from rooftops. Connor then in turn criticizes Achilles' faulty leadership of the colonial assassins, which led the Templars to dominating the colonies. And it's a moment of like, again, this mentor moment that happens. Connor's basically like, you know, I've done all this success that we've had against the Templars because of me. And Achilles is basically, okay, so you can give back the robes and the hidden blades and all the years of training, the food, the shelter, all of that thing.
Right.
Achilles also tells him that life is not a fairy tale and there aren't happy endings. And Connor, in his arrogance, just says, that's only true when men like Achilles were in charge. And then he walks away. And then Achilles shouts after him very much that if he wants to save the world, he should avoid destroying it in the process. It kind of, it reminds me of the Star Wars scene where Yoda and Obi-Wan are trying to prevent Luke from rushing off to Vader.
Yeah.
So Connor meets with Washington in the Continental camp at Valley Forge, where the commander can find in that a large number of supplies meant for his troop have been stolen. And they suspect this Templar named Benjamin Church is the one behind it. He was a traitor to the Continental Army, a defector back to the British. He had been released from prison. And so Washington asked Connor to investigate. where the supplies had been missing. So he arrives at this church where they were supposed to be, and he walks in, it's empty, but then from above, he's attacked by none other than Haytham Kenway. So
Does Haytham know that this is his son?
Yes, at this point he does. And because Lee remembered who he was, and so they did some investigating and realized that he was going by Connor Kenway.
Right.
And so they go back and forth, and they're circling each other. Connor accuses Haytham of coming to check on the traitor Benjamin Church. However, Haytham says that he defected from the Templars and the Continental Army, and Haytham suggests that they work together to track him down, to which Connor agrees.
This seems like a bad idea.
Yeah. So they hunt Church's men through the frontier, where eventually led to the Smith and Company Brewery in New York. So Haytham is known, like he's a Templar, he's an important guy, and he can get in no problem. And he tells Connor to wait, and Connor's like, nuh-uh, not happening. We go together or we don't go. And so Connor disguises himself as a mercenary. And when they're going there, Haytham openly introduces him and says, "This is my son."
What? Why? I feel like that's stupid.
Well, and it's like a moment where like it even catches Connor off guard that like he would do that. But I think that why he does that is because one of the best ways to lie is to include a truth in it.
I mean, true.
Yeah. And so while inside, they have a conversation about Connor's mother, as Haytham hadn't heard from her since Connor was conceived.
Right.
However, Connor isn't having any of that, and he belligerently answers that she had been murdered under his orders. And Haytham is shocked by this. He claimed that he ordered no such thing, and that he told his Templars to not pursue the precursor site and to just give up on that. Connor looks at his father and says, "I've run out of forgiveness."
Mm.
So they find Church, and they're tracking him down, and he's sailing to somewhere. And so Connor gets on the Aquila with Haytham, and they get into conflict with Church's ship. At one point, they ram into it, causing a fight to happen between. Connor chases after Haytham to keep up with him. He finds Haytham violently beating Church, yelling at him for betraying the order. Connor holds back Haytham and begins to interrogate Church himself. Church does not want to speak, so Connor kills him. And in his dying breath, Church reveals where the supplies are. He also attempted to justify his actions, stating that King George had every right to feel betrayed, that the British were not without cause. Which, maybe.
Okay, no, whatever.
And so, pleased by the success working together, they were able to get these supplies. Connor begins to believe that the Assassins and Templars might be able to unite due to their similar goals, which we've talked about before in this. They both want peace. They both want an end to conflict in the world. But I think
they go about it in totally opposite ways.
Right.
And for different reasons. For totally different reasons.
Right. And I think this is another moment where we see Connor's age kind of coming through, and that he knows that like he's not seeing things in the full picture. He's not thinking about them as complex as they are. And not noticing the nuance.
Which, like, what is he, 18, 19 at this time?
It's 17-7, so he's 21.
Okay, so 21. Still, his prefrontal cortex still has not fully developed yet.
Right. And I think it's also a thing about, like, he's blinded by the idea. It's not about uniting the Templars and Assassins. It's about uniting him and Haytham.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think let's go to our break real quick.
Yeah, okay, let's do it. Okay, this is the break, and this is where we talk about all things that have to do with the Assassin's Creed lorecast, but not necessarily the actual lore of the Assassin's Creed universe. So this is the time where I tell you one of the best ways to help the show is to give us a like, rating, review, and share our show with your friends who you might think would be interested in the show. So you can also leave us a review on Apple with words, and you can leave us a rating on Spotify without words. If you do leave us a review on Apple with words, it's 5 stars. We will read it out on the show, but I don't think we have one to read today. Do we, Austin?
I do not believe so.
We do not. So you can be the next one we read on the show if you review us today. Another way that you will soon be able to help us is via Patreon. We are launching one. It's not live yet, but it will be coming soon. So stay tuned for that. And finally, my last thing that I have to tell you about is Discord. So if you want to get the first news on the Assassin's Creed Lorecast, or on any of mine and Teacup's other shows, the Dragon Age Lorecast and Holocron Histories, Discord is where it's at. We have our own server, the Cups Podcasting and More server, and that is the official home of all of our podcasts, and they get first news. So come join us over there if you want that first news, or if you want to see pictures of our dog and other people's dogs and the funny memes we share. You should definitely join us over there, or you can join us on the Robots Radio Discord. We are still members of the Robots Radio Rocket Club, and there are all kinds of really amazing podcasts in that server that you can find in addition to ours. So links to both of those servers will be in the episode description. Is there anything else, Austin, that I've forgotten?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, let's get back to it.
All right. So we're nearing the end
Of the war.
Yes.
Not the episode.
Mm-hmm. So sometime after the assassination of Benjamin Church, Connor decides that, hey, I'm going to go see my dad because I think our orders can align. He does apologize to Achilles for his harsh words before they left. There is a reconciliation between the two, and he presents the idea of unity to him. However, Achilles openly disapproved, insisting that it was impossible to work alongside the Templars and that the assassins' goals could never be accomplished while Haytham is still alive.
I mean, I don't disagree with that.
Yes. And Achilles just operates from an entirely different worldview than Connor does, because he had an assassin's brotherhood and it was taken from him by Haytham.
Right. So of course he's like, no, there's no way that we could ever unite with this person who did all this horrible stuff to us, who killed so many of us.
Right.
I support Achilles. I get where he's coming from.
Mm-hmm. So nonetheless, Connor tracks down Haytham in New York, where he finds him working to discover the plans of the British Army. Haytham was frustrated to find that his spies did not know what the plans were, and that they had only been told to wait from orders from above. Connor simply says, well, then let's track down the commanders and get the information from them.
Of course.
And so they track them to a meeting at Trinity Church, which had been recently burned down by the Great Fire of New York. And after ambushing them, the two were able to detain 3 commanders, the last one having been recaptured during an attempt to flee. They take them to Haytham's quarters in Fort George, and they question them. The 3 revealed the British forces' plans to withdraw from Philadelphia and proceed to New York within the next 2 days. Haytham then kills the officers, much to Connor's disapproval. And though he's very angered by the lack of mercy that his father shows, he turns his intentions to important matters and leaves to warn Washington, while Haytham says, nah, we should go tell Charles Lee. He's the person we need to tell. which Connor's just like, nah, screw Charles Lee. So Connor explains the situation to Washington. Haytham kind of sneakily looks over the commander's shoulder, basically, and reads his correspondence, and it contains that the commander had just ordered the burning of Connor's village and the salting of their land, since many of his tribe had been aiding the British. See, last episode you asked. Here you are.
Well, I thought they would be. So I was like, this isn't okay. Let's see.
Right. So the Templar also, Haytham also brings up the burning of Connor's village several years previously, which he says Washington had been responsible for. And in response, Connor cuts ties with Washington, as Haytham's very happy about this. He calls for his son to leave with him, and Connor rejects Haytham as well and accuses Haytham of withholding this information until it best suited to him to reveal.
Is this information the truth, or is it a lie?
Yes, it is it is the truth, and that George Washington had been sent there to burn the village, and that Charles Lee and them were working with the kind of army at that point to burn down this village.
Okay. But I can understand why he would basically cut ties with everyone, because he feels betrayed by everyone, by Charles Lee, obviously, but also by Washington and by his father, who chose to deliberately keep this information from him.
Yes. And so he says to them, if you follow me, I'll kill you. Which, how he walks out of that tent is beyond me, after threatening the general of the Continental Army.
Connor says that to Washington.
To Washington and Haytham, he says, if either of you follow me, I will kill you.
I mean, the reason why he walks out, is able to walk out from Washington, is probably because there weren't a lot of other people in the tent, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, because he's done so much for the colonials that they're figuring, well, as long as we don't follow him, it'll be fine.
Right. So he kills Washington's messengers, and he gets to his village, where he finds it unharmed. However, the clan mother informs him that Lee had already rallied several of the village warriors to repel invading Continental soldiers. Unwilling for his village to become involved in the war, Connor basically knocks out all the people who are encroaching. However, his friend Togon, he is able to get to him last, and he sees him coming, and he throws him off and threatens him with a knife. He mentions that he should not have believed that Connor would protect their village, accusing him of turning against their people and being seduced by Washington's cause. Though Connor desperately insists that Lee fed him lies, his friend attacks him, and Connor is forced to kill him.
That's really sad, because basically everything that his friend accuses him of is the opposite. Like, he's not turning against their people. He's not being seduced by Washington's cause. Like, that's not at all what's happening.
Right. And this is a point of, like, what we talked about with the Salem witch trials, like the Templars using fear and hysteria to manipulate people.
Yes.
So Connor chases Lee to Monmouth, which should be a name you recognize.
Yeah.
So he arrives and finds a French contingent soldiers led by none other than Marquis de Lafayette. And Lafayette told Connor that Lee showed up moments before to take charge, screaming at everyone to advance before riding away. At that moment, a large number of British soldiers came to the surrounding area. Connor volunteered to cover their retreat, and Connor and a small group of Lafayette's soldiers held off the advance with cannon fire before falling back. As they fall back, Connor rescues several colonial soldiers that were going to be executed before reaching the main force led by Washington.
I'm sorry. Every time you say Lafayette, all I can hear is all of the different ways that Southern states mispronounce it in their town names. Because, like, if you don't know, every Southern state in the United States pretty much has a town named Lafayette, but none of them pronounce it Lafayette. Like in Tennessee, it's Lafayette.
Now, there's also Lafayette.
Yeah, and like Lafayette. Like there are so many different pronunciations. So that's all I can think about.
Yeah. But as they arrive, Lafayette congratulates Connor for saving so many lives. But the assassin only turned to address Washington. Connor told him that Lee had betrayed the Continental Army, a claim that Lafayette supported due to Lee's unusual behavior before the battle. Washington said that he would look into the issue, and Connor responds that the time for doing such thing has passed. Connor departs the battlefield. He warned Washington that if the latter spared Lee's life, he would take it himself. And then he says one of my favorite lines that he says. He says, "Enjoy your victory, Commander. It's the last one I deliver you."
I mean, fair. He has every right to feel that way, I feel.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting compared to like what we actually know about the Battle of Monmouth, which, you know, after the Battle of Monmouth, like that's the end of Lee's military career, really. The soldiers under his care, they basically turn on him. And like, we know that John Lawrence and Alexander Hamilton challenge him to a duel, basically, and they shoot him. And like Washington is all pissed about it. And it's just interesting kind of the parallels here of like Washington continually defense of Lee. And I think that this comes from Washington's idea of like, he wants to keep the Continental Army as united as he can. And that he realizes that the British are a far superior military force. So if any kind of division happens, it's going to be detrimental to the Continental Army. I think that's where Washington is coming from it. But I mean, there are several signs in history when we study the American Revolution that Charles Lee is not, he's allied with the revolution, but he's not a friend to it, really.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And also something that it really illuminates for me is that for Americans, this is obvious. For non-Americans, this may not be obvious. Even from the early days, we had 13 colonies. Now we have 50 states and several territories. But we are not like this melting pot that we often pretend like we are. And especially, you know, we could talk about that with race, but especially among the different states too. Like, we've lived in different states and we've had friends, you and I, Austin, from different places. And we had a friend in grad school who would always say that like America is too big of a country. Like each state is its own country. And I think that she was right in that. And I think that principle goes back even into the American Revolution. And we see that here where we have people from different states who are arguing, who are having disunity in this military that has tried to come together for one of the first times. And it doesn't really work the way they want it to.
Right. And it's important to know that like for Charles Lee, at least historically, he comes from a military family. Like all of his ancestors were military. So there's also this sense of pride. Like he feels he is owed like command because of his family. Whereas Washington got it based on merit, really.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it too. And so that's Connor basically just, for lack of a better thing, gives, you know, the middle finger to the revolution and says, call me when you're ready to deal with the Templars, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 1781, Connor went to Achilles, who is now sick and basically on his deathbed. Achilles requested news of the revolution, and Connor responded that the colonists were winning and the country might finally be free from British rule. Achilles tells him that Haytham and Lee need to die, even though Connor does believe that they can work together. So afterward, Connor sees that Lafayette is in the mansion's basement, where Connor reveals his strategy for entering Fort George. He would need the French allies to disguise themselves as British so they could fire upon the fort, giving Connor the opportunity to kill Lee. So this is the battle. At the Battle of Chesapeake Bay, Connor, with the Aquila, basically helps the French in fighting the British. But due to the British's navy, the French ships sink, and their man-o'-war, which is a big British ship, destroys the cannons on the Aquila. And Lafayette is too far away. However, Connor forces the Aquila to ram and boards the man-of-war alone, leaving his crew behind. Connor kills the captain and shoots the gunpowder catch before quickly escaping and getting free.
Wow.
And Connor, before assaulting Fort George, he briefly returns to the homestead where he learns that Achilles has indeed passed. And he finds a letter that Achilles' property would all go to Connor, that his appearance of the old man's life had been great hope for the future of the nation Connor would help create. He also learns here that Achilles named him after his son who died at an early age of a sickness. So Connor Kenway his namesake is Connor Davenport.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Break my heart.
At the funeral service, Connor and the homestead residents that he had built up, they buried Achilles next to his wife and son, to remembered as the old man on the hill. Yeah. So Connor, with this newfound to make Achilles proud, he goes into the military district of New York. He uses the underground tunnels that were built under the city. He lights a signal fire, calling the French ships to assault Fort George. However, Connor was caught in the bombardment and injured. He goes into Fort George, and he finds himself face to face with Haytham. Haytham had foreseen Connor's arrival and had sent Lee away. After a duel between the two, Haytham is holding Connor by the throat, and then giving him a speech about how he failed. Connor, midway through that speech, stabs Haytham in the neck. And in his dying words, Haytham states that he was in a way proud of Connor and that he should have killed him long before.
I don't like him very much.
Yeah. Well, don't make a judgment yet.
I am making a judgment now.
Okay. So Connor recovers Haytham's journal, where he reads about his father's tragic life, which is very, very tragic. He's inducted basically into the assassins at early age. I'm not going to go too much because I want to save a Haytham Kenway episode, but he has life of betrayal. He also discovers that Haytham saved Connor's life, that one of the assassin's arrows didn't go all the way through the noose, and it was Haytham who threw a knife to finally cut the rope.
Oh, whatever. That doesn't make him noble all of a sudden. Anyone would save their son.
Yeah, and then Connor learned that Haytham feigned ignorance about his mother's death, as he assumed Connor would never believe Washington was responsible.
That still doesn't make me like him.
Yeah, and so with this knowledge, Connor marks his father off the list with a symbol from his tribe to signify his regret that they falling out, but still remained absolute in his decision to support the assassin order. Basically, following this encounter, Connor shaves his head into a mohawk and smears his face with war paint as tradition for going into battle for his tribe. And he confronts Charles Lee at Haytham's funeral. Connor is immediately captured. Lee is enraged by Haytham's death and declared that he would keep Connor alive so he could watch Lee destroy everything he loved. His village, the homestead, everything. Charles leaves, ordering the guards to take care of Connor, which they begin beating him, but Connor escapes and boards a British prison ship stealthily and learned that Lee was in Boston, and then he kills the officer on the British ship. Connor then confronts Lee at the Boston docks. They have a conflict. They run through the city. They're caught into a ferry. where they're both injured and Lee escapes again. And in this, he asks why Connor continued to fight despite being turned on at every point, even by the very men he sought to save. And Connor replies, because no one else will, and shoots Lee in the stomach. That's just a badass scene, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good quote. I feel like that quote really sums up his story. Like,
yeah,
no one else will do this, so I have to.
And it's very reminiscent in like storytelling of like kind of like the call of the hero, like the thing, you have to do this because no one else will. Luke has to confront Vader because no one else can. And there are all these points like, and that's the assassin's kind of mantra. And like where Bayek and Aya even start this Hidden One order is that we are fighting for these people because no one else is.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I say he very much exemplifies what it means to be an assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And so Connor learns that Lee fled to Monmouth. There he finds him at an inn and bleeding out and drinking silently. Connor offers each other. The two have a wordless interaction where Lee just nods at Connor, and Connor stabs Lee in the heart and steals the key to the Grand Temple, which will come important later in Desmond's story. And then setting him down on the table like a patron who had simply had too much to drink, and then he leaves. And so that's how he kills Lee.
So the other people around don't know that he's really killed him. They just think he's too drunk.
Right.
Interesting.
And then 6 months later, Connor returns to his village to discover his people had left. There was a frontiersman sitting by a fire. He revealed that Connor's people had gone west and that a man in New York had been given the land by the newly formed Congress. When Connor asked how this happened, the man told him that the country did not have England to supply them with resources anymore and that the Congress needed to do things themselves. And so Connor enters the longhouse and he sees the crystal ball, the piece of Eden that he was shown earlier. Confused why it was left behind, suddenly the artifact triggered and Juno comes to him again. She was pleased that Connor had returned. Anger, Connor is basically like, I didn't accomplish my goal. Like his people were driven out by like the people that he fought with and helped put in power. And then Juno just simply tells him that he needs to keep the key he took from Charles Lee and hide it. Connor is confused, and Juno simply tells him that he was only required to hide it and he would be free to live his own life. So he buries the amulet in the grave of his namesake, Connor Davenport, and he removes the portraits of the Templars and burns them in a fire. He then retrieves the tomahawk from the column he had implanted in, signifying the war was over, and he tossed it aside. From there, Connor left to New York, arrived on evacuation day when the last British ship were leaving. As the colonists teased them from land, the ship fired a warning shot that sank into the ocean. Connor turned and smiled at the colonists' freedom, but only saw a man selling African slaves, reminding him that not everyone in this new land had been freed just yet. During this time in the city, he also meets with Washington. He asked Washington what he would do now that the war was over. When Washington responds that he was planning to retire, Connor is disappointed and argues that he should continue leading the country in peacetime as well as war.
It's interesting to me that he has so much respect for Washington still.
Right. I think that it's a point of like, he knows that Washington at least tries to fight for freedom, at least in his own way. And that like, I think it's a point of like, he knows Washington will always be Washington. He doesn't have to really expect deception from Washington.
Right.
He can trust him to always act as Washington would act.
Right. He's not going to be like a two-faced kind of backstabbing leader. He's a leader with some level of integrity, even if he is also a slave owner.
Right. And we talked about like George Washington could convince you to eat your sock. So,
Yeah. He's a talented public speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Well, do you have more to add about Connor, or should we talk about why we like him or why we dislike him?
I think we can go on to talk about why we like and dislike him.
Okay. Well, I'll start since I know less about him than you do. I have really enjoyed these past 2 episodes and everything you've told me about him. I knew a little bit about him already, but not much since I haven't played all of his games yet. But I do like him. I know that there are a lot of people who dislike him because he's so whiny. And that's like what people say about why they don't like him. But I kind of think he has every right to be whiny. I think he has every right to be upset after all that he's gone through and all that his people have gone through, including his mother's death. And also, I think that you're right in that we forget he's a teenager for most of this. Like he's not an adult. He's still a young kid. Like he may not be a child literally, but like he is still young and has not seen the world. He hasn't seen all of the world.
Right. So I think another thing for Connor for me is that I do think he's in a perfect embodiment of the assassin ideology. I also think that he is probably the most dangerous assassin we've ever controlled.
Why?
Because he is absolute in his devotion to the assassin cause. Like, yes, he's the only one he kind of affords kindness for is Haytham, his own father, which is understandable. But like, it's very much of like he realizes that these Templars have to die. And it might not be the most moral way to do this, but it's for the betterment of the world. And he is absolute in his destruction of the Templars. And, you know, he is very much this legend among the American colonies at this point as this man who like shows up and like kind of like in the Commander Shepard way, like Connor shows up and they know they're going to win because he is so skilled and moves about.
How many video games can we reference in this episode?
I don't know.
Well, do you have any final closing thoughts on Connor?
Well, yeah, I want to talk about just kind of the legacy of him and the legacy of the American Revolution a little bit. Like I said kind of in the last episode, I think that Connor's lens is an important one for the series and shows that it's a good like take on a historical moment to tell this through the lens of someone who's indigenous. And I think that I really applaud Ubisoft on not making Connor kind of like blindly follow the American Revolution, and that like he has true critiques and caution about their intentions.
Right. Yeah, I think it would be really easy for them to have not done the research and made him into a stereotype. And I'm really glad they didn't do that.
Right. I also think that like this is a great use of, they use a lot of Native American language, which, you know, you and I both know is at danger of being lost. And so the fact that it's preserved in a video game is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also think for the legacy, this really changes how the assassins operate. Because before this, they had bureaus and hideaways with hundreds or thousands of assassins around. Connor does this just himself. He dismantles the colonial Templars just himself. And I think that it teaches the assassins that they only really need one of them to move about and accomplish what they need.
Yeah.
And yes, that person needs support, but when it's only one person, if it's the right person, they can accomplish more than like, say, Achilles did with his hundreds of assassins that helped him.
Well, it's also about being the right person in the right place at the right time.
Mhm.
Like, we don't know what Achilles would have done with his brotherhood if he had been around 20 years later, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I think that it just shows that, like, and later in Assassins, like, they are using one assassin to accomplish these goals. Like, in Unity, they have a more established brotherhood, but that's because it's in France and they're in an assassin stronghold city. And so I just think that that's really important and something that they continue to learn, because it's Altair that takes down the Holy Land Templar Rite. It is Ezio who takes down the Borgia. It is all these people. And even Edward Kenway isn't even an assassin, and he takes down the West Indies Templars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And I think also it is note that Connor has Isu DNA. Yeah.
You know, we really do an episode on the Isu.
Yes, it's coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anything else about Connor and his story?
I think that's it.
Well, I really enjoyed this. I know it was a two-parter, and sometimes people don't love two-part series, but I really liked this one.
Yes. It's a lot good time. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap this thing up unless you have anything else.
I do not have anything else.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next week on the Assassin's Creed Lorecast.
Thanks for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at Assassin's Creed Lorecast, or you could talk to us on Discord in the Robots Radio Discord or our personal Discord server, both links found in this episode's descriptions. Thank you for listening, and always stay to the shadows to serve the light, Assassins.
Hi, welcome to 3 Count Thoughts. Let me introduce the crew real quick.
Hi, I'm Maverick Stone.
I'm Romer.
And I am Jaxus. Join us as we talk all things wrestling. Each week, we'll take a topic from the wrestling world, knock it around a bit, and then go over the week in wrestling from a strictly fan perspective. We can be found on all major podcast catchers. We can also be found at 3 Count Thoughts on both YouTube and Twitter. Or you can send us an email using 3countthoughts@gmail.com. Okay, are you ready? Ring the bell.